There we go. Okay, so we're using a platform today called Zoom, and it might be a little new for some of you. One of the things that's really nice about Zoom is it's very easy to get on. We've tried some other platforms, and sometimes it's harder for people to get on, and we like the ease of being able to get on. Being able to get on this way. And one of the things, though, is that because we have so many people on the call, it's really helpful if everyone mutes themselves unless you're asking a question or something. You can also ask questions in the chat box, and Lauren Hill, who I'll introduce to you all in a second, is she's helping out with the text box. Okay, and I think that we'll go ahead and get started. So the focus of our chat this evening is that we're going to be talking about National Board. There is a new version of National Board that's just being rolled out this year. It's called National Board 3.0. And the intent of this is for people who find themselves in an elementary situation where they're either a math interventionist or a math specialist and finding it hard to find a certification area. We are going to talk about how you can certify as a generalist. If you are not a math specialist, we are still going to be talking about the process, and if you're a classroom teacher, we'll be talking about the process, and you will have valuable information from this conversation. We're just going to spend a little bit of time talking about what this might mean for people that are math specialists as part of our conversation. All right, so my name is Suzanne Farmer. I'm the one in the middle, and I am the Kentucky director of a project called the Network to Transform Teaching. And what that is it's a grant that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and our national partner is the National Board. And we have 3 partners in the state of Kentucky that are officially on this project, and those are the Kentucky Department of Education, the Kentucky Education Association, and the Education Professional Standards Board, which is actually where I'm housed when I work in an office. I usually work from home, and the grant project that funds my work has 2 large aims. One is to recruit more teachers for National Board certification and get more National Board certified teachers in Kentucky. The other is to support teacher leadership opportunities for existing National Board certified teachers, and to explore and promote teacher leadership so that people can stay in the classroom as teacher leaders. And Lauren Hill, who is very savvy with this format and with virtual learning. She's actually helping a lot with the technical aspect tonight. She is a nationally board certified teacher as well. I should mention I'm nationally board certified. Lauren is also nationally board certified, and she is helping to keep up with the chat box because we have a large group and with the technology. Lauren, you want to tell them a little bit about what you do?
I can, sure. Welcome, you guys. It's really great to show up on the first night of your break. So let me just say right off that I am someone who appreciates that. My name is Lauren Hill, and I work with Suzanne with the Network to Transform Teaching to support National Board certification. And I'm also a high school English teacher. And what is so great about my job is I get to continue to teach high school in the afternoon, and then I work with the grant. I teach in the morning and I work with the grant in the afternoon, which I've really enjoyed because I get to keep one foot in the classroom and still do some leadership work that I love. And I have had a bunch of virtual experience, so that's been one of the things I've added to the work. And thank you all for coming. This is a great thing to pursue. I am a National Board certified teacher, and it's probably the best thing I ever did for my professional career. So thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you, Lauren. And also this evening with us, we have Alice Gabbard. And I want to back up and say a little bit about this partnership with the Kentucky Center for Mathematics. So when I certified as a National Board Certified teacher, I was a preschool teacher. And I had a background in interdisciplinary early childhood education. So I certified as an early childhood generalist. And then I had the great fortune to become a math intervention teacher through the Kentucky Center for Mathematics. And I was trained as a math interventionist through Math Recovery, and worked in that role for 7 years between 2 different school districts. And learned so much in that role and had such a fabulous experience working with the Kentucky Center for Mathematics that, and I know that when I was working with the center through the grant work there, that there were a lot of MITs who I met who were some of the very best teachers that I ever met. And many of them are on the call tonight. So when I would ask people about becoming nationally board certified, many of them would say, well, there isn't a math certification. And they were looking for the opportunity to certify, and I know that they would be very successful, but it was just hard to fit in that role as a math intervention teacher. So this is my attempt to try to resolve that for all of the very qualified math people that I know in elementary school. And Alice is helping with this conversation that we're trying to have to support those roles. So Alice, do you want to take a second and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm so excited to be here. This has been something that's been sort of a dream for many years, and we had appealed to the math specialists are critical to improving our statewide mathematics achievement. And so through Suzanne and a lot of other great MITs, we made an appeal many years ago, and then Common Core came around, and I think that kind of slowed down the process. So I'm so grateful that Suzanne has negotiated the system to figure out how we can focus on early math and within the framework of what certification is available. So I am here. I was a middle grades math teacher before starting to work at the KCM, and I'm just excited to get to work with all kinds of awesome teachers around Kentucky. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can support the cohort.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, so as Lauren pointed out, becoming nationally board certified was really one of the very best things that she had gone through as a teacher. And every teacher that I've talked to in this role that I have now that's nationally board certified says the same thing, that it's some of the most powerful professional development that they've ever experienced. What I really like about National Board, one of the things that it's really nice about it is that it teaches you to be an expert in differentiation, to constantly be growing, and to learn from your mistakes. So when there are actually, we'll get to it in a little bit about the components, there are videotape component that is going to be submitted to prove that you're an effective teacher, and those videotapes don't have to be perfect. Those videotapes are real world, and it's a way for you to reflect and to grow. Okay, so just some general information. One of the things that is obvious, but it's actually very powerful about National Board is that it's completely voluntary. So this isn't something that you have to do to stay a teacher in Kentucky or to become a teacher. It's something that you're showing everyone that you've gone above and beyond to prove your effectiveness and to continue to grow as a professional. It's highly recognized across the country as the highest certification that you could achieve as a professional. It really puts you in a nice group of elite learners. And again, it's really powerful and relevant to what you're doing in the classroom. In order to become a candidate for National Board, you have to have at least 3 years of teaching experience in a public or private school. It just has to be accredited. You have to have a bachelor's degree, and you have to have a valid teaching license. You do not have to have a master's degree or a 5th-year degree, but when you do get those things, it will give you your rank 1. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. National Board certification, more than anything, will help you to become a better teacher. It will validate your teaching practice. Again, some incentives with that is that it will provide you with a rank 1 if you don't already have one, and if you have your master's completed. The state will pay a stipend of $2,000 each year for the life of your certificate, and some districts have an additional stipend that they pay on top of that. In fact, I think most districts do. There are, I think, 37 states that recognize National Board certification as a portable teaching license. So if you do move, you wouldn't have to go through anything else to become a valid teacher, to have a teacher's license in those states. In fact, I was just in Washington State, and National Board supersedes their teaching license. So you don't even have to have a Washington State teaching license. If you're in Washington, you can go straight to National Board as you're trying to pursue that. One of the things that's really nice about it is also gives you a lot of opportunities for advancing your career. Teachers that are nationally board certified are asked often to be a part of conferences or committees that aren't always available to everybody. All right, it's going to, the thing when you're going through the process, when you're looking for evidence to prove that you're ready for certification, everything has to be tied back to student growth. And what that means is that you are going to definitely improve your growth with your students, because you're going to be very focused on your instruction, and you have to analyze assessments at a detail that you may not be you may not have done before, and it's going to increase your students' learning. In fact, there is a lot of great research to show that teachers that go through National Board certification are much more effective at teaching students than teachers that don't, or teachers that go through and don't certify. Interestingly, there is also similar research to show that that's not the case for teachers that get a master's degree. Getting a master's degree does not make you a more effective teacher. So this is really worth your time. I learned a lot more through National Board than a master's or rank 1. I should mention that sometimes people will say, well, why should I go through it if I already have my rank 1? And Lauren and I could both speak to that, because we both already had our rank 1 when we got our National Board certification. And I did it because I knew I needed to be a better teacher. And Lauren has a great story to tell about why she did it as well. And really, I don't regret it at all. Yeah, I got a small stipend each year that for going through it, but really it was more about making myself a better teacher. One of the things that happens once you become nationally board certified is that it will force you to collaborate more with your peers, and it will bring some really positive attention to your school, and it will help you to fall into a mentoring role with some teachers that may be struggling or new. Another thing I really like about National Board is that there's not one right way to become certified. Good teaching can look very different in lots of different classrooms. And so what's nice about National Board, it's a little frustrating when you're going through it, but there's a lot of privacy in terms of sharing portfolios from people that are certified. So if you choose to go through the process and you want a mentor, your mentor is ethically bound to not show you their portfolio. They can maybe show you small sections, like a paragraph, but they can't show you their portfolio, or they are at risk of losing their certification. And the reason that this is all very private is because they don't want people to think, well, it has to look like this. They want you to come to reflect on what you're doing and make what you're doing better. So it's not intended to be frustrating, although when you're going through it, it does feel a little private sometimes, but really all of the answers for how to get better are within you and your classroom, and your mentor can guide you to that, but they're not going to tell you what it should look like. That's something you need to get comfortable with, and it needs to make sense for what's best for you and for your students. But everyone who certifies, even though it's going to look different, all of those teachers have demonstrated that they are very reflective and can analyze student learning. Okay. I don't like to think of National Board Certification as one extra thing, because really it's stuff that we're already doing or should be doing, but much better. So it will push you to really look at best practice and to focus on the needs of your students. It's all about what you do for your kids and just looking at it in more detail. One of the examples of that is this National Board is based on 5 core propositions, which are listed in the box on the right-hand corner. And they take the 5 core propositions and they use this architecture of teaching, of accomplished teaching. And really, that's just a teaching and learning cycle. And for those of you that are math recovery trained, you know that it's just like that. Okay, Alice, I'm totally blanking on the name, and there's like 10 math recovery people that I know that are on the call. It's the teaching cycle, teaching and learning cycle. Is that the name of it?
I believe you're right, yes.
Okay. But it's just this idea, if you follow it up, is it's seeing where your students are and how do you know, and setting appropriate goals for them for where they are at that time, implementing that instruction, evaluating it, reflecting on it, and setting new goals. And you just keep going through this cycle. Those of you that are math recovery trained will be very familiar and comfortable with all of the reflection, which is new for some people that haven't gone through something like this before. Another thing that's really great about National Board and makes it another example of best practice is it's written by teachers for teachers. And that doesn't happen all the time, as we know, as teachers. So practicing classroom teachers developed the standards that were involved in this, developing the standards for National Board. They develop the assessments, they score the assessments, they provide candidate support, which would be like mentoring or training, and they also are responsible for advocating for education reforms. In Kentucky, we are, as you know, required to get a master's degree eventually as teachers. But what's different about National Board is that when you go through National Board certification, you're reflecting on your teaching and your students and your classroom all the time. You decide where you need to grow through your reflection, and you're looking at best practice for your area that you're interested in. You are collaborating on your own with your colleagues in your community and your cohort, and with, as you know, traditional school, graduate school, or even undergraduate school, you don't get to choose your assignments. Those are given to you by an instructor, and they may or may not even be relevant to your needs or your interests or your kids in your classroom. And you're really just getting feedback from an instructor on how you did, instead of feedback from yourself and from your cohorts. In Kentucky, we're very familiar now with the professional growth and effectiveness model, which is based on the Charlotte Danielson framework. One of the things that I learned recently from a colleague of ours who's on our team here in Kentucky for our project, our grant project, she was involved when the standards were originally written for National Board, and she said, well, you know why it feels so much like the PGES is because Charlotte Danielson was in the room when those standards were written. And really, they're both about best practice. It's just analyzing what you do more and reflecting on your teaching. As you know, the PGS domains, there's the 4 big domains: planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. And you'll see there's many crosswalks to show and a lot of overlap with the 5 core, the National Board 5 core propositions. And they're all really, they're just common sense. This is what we should be doing or are doing every day, that we're committed to students and their learning. We know the subjects that we teach and how to teach them to kids. We're responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. We think systematically about the practice and learn from our experiences, and we're members of learning communities. Again, it's really very much the same thing. Now, National Board Certification covers the entire spectrum of learning with 25 different certificates in 16 different content areas and 7 developmental levels. So almost everybody really has a place where they can fit in here. And actually, I've pretty much decided that everyone has a place. I haven't found anyone that I can't plug into one of these certificate areas. And that's kind of what we're trying to do tonight. We're trying to make this very appropriate for anyone who wants to apply for National Board Certification. The areas, if you are in elementary school and you are focused in math, that are appropriate for you are the generalist certificates. There are not math certificates in elementary school at this time. I'm trying to get, and I know Alice had mentioned the Kentucky Center for Mathematics had tried to get an elementary math specialist added. It's very expensive to add certificate areas, and it takes several years. And right now, with the revisions to National Board process, I don't expect anything to happen in the near future. But I am interested in trying to get some grant funding to fund a certificate in the long run that would be either math or STEM focused for elementary school. But I don't want you all to wait that long because it may never happen. The mathematics certificates start in middle and in high school. So if we have anyone who's in middle or high school on the line, then those would be the appropriate certificate areas for your specialty area. Okay, one of the reasons that you should go on and just do this now instead of waiting is that right now there's a lot of grant money in the state. And as we know, grant money doesn't always stick around. The grants that are funding the work that I'm doing and that Lauren is doing, we have a 2-year funding cycle right now. We're funded for 2 years, and after that, we don't know that we'll get any more money. I think that National Board is planning on applying for more money after that, but there's no guarantee. It was a 2-year grant. And right now, we can fund for candidates to have compensated trained mentors. I know that I had a mentor that was fantastic, and I can't imagine trying to do the process without her. We are also funding projects like this webinar and collaboration with the Kentucky Center for Mathematics and Jumpstart trainings in the area so that, you can get a head start. We're also looking at funding virtual trainings for people. And one of the other reasons it's really nice to start National Board right now is because with the new rollout, and we're going to talk about it here in a sec, there's a 3-year timeline, which makes it much more manageable for people that have lives and are trying to teach at the same time. So when I certified, I had an infant, and it was just really, really hard to manage because I had to do everything within 1 year. Hold on, we're gonna wait for someone to mute there. All right, thanks. Okay, so the 4 components to National Board Certification, these have changed. So if you know people that have gone through it in the past, it looks different now. Component 1 is the content knowledge part of the package, and that's a computer-based assessment center. So you would go to a Pearson Learning Center type situation and take a test, and we'll look at that in a minute in a little more detail. And component 2, which is a portfolio entry that's based on, it's called the differentiation and instruction for all content areas, and it's based on student work samples, and we'll look at that a little more closely here in a minute too. Those are darker because components 3 and 4 are not rolled out yet, so we don't know exactly what those are going to look like. Component 3 will be rolled out next year, and that is a portfolio entry that will involve videotape, and it's teaching practice and learning environment. And component 4 will be rolled out the following year, and that's a portfolio entry that's looking at effective and reflective practitioner. Okay, so the rollouts by year. This year, those first two components are available. Next year, component 3 is added, but if you waited to start till next year, then you could complete the process in 2 years if you wanted. And in 2016-17, all 4 components will be available, so you could complete in 1 year if you wanted to try to bang it all out at once, or you could still have up to 3 years to finish. And that just looks like this on this timeline with the fees. So each component is $475, and each year that you remain an active candidate, there's a $75 fee. So if you take 3 years, you'd have to pay $150 more than if you did it in 1 year. And I would say it's well worth it to have that time to complete those entries and to really focus and to not overwhelm yourself. It's a small price to pay for your sanity, I think. The deadline to enroll and pay your fees for this year is February 28th. Component 1, which is, again, that assessment center, would have to be done by June 15th. And the component 2, which is the portfolio entry, has to be uploaded by May 15th. So it's all electronic now. And that gives you a little time if you wanted to do both of those this year, you could submit your portfolio. And then if you schedule your assessment center towards the end of that window, you'd have a month to really focus and to study more on your test, if you wanted to do it that way. So the first thing that you pay is the $75 application fee, and you can even start working on the portfolio components before you pay all of those fees. The remaining balance for the components, depending on how many you do, would be due by February 28th, and there's some eligibility forms that would need to be turned in too at that time, just to prove that you have been teaching for 3 years. Then you can go ahead and schedule your assessment center, and you schedule that for whatever time frame makes sense for you. You have to submit, again, your portfolio by the 15th and your assessment center by June 15th. The component 1, the assessment center, has 3 constructed response items, and these look very similar to what Lauren and I and other National Board Certified Teachers had in the past. The assessment used to be 6 of these constructed response items. They're scenario based, so they may say something like, some of the released ones are things like, look at this child's paper, and let's say there's a bunch of shapes on it, and the child was supposed to circle the triangles. And then you look at what the child did, analyze their misunderstandings, and determine what next steps you would take as a teacher and justify why you would do that. So that would be one example of a constructed response. Or look at a child's report card in the area of literacy and determine what their strengths are, and then how you would teach to those strengths, what you would do for your next steps. So they're similar to that kind of a question. And then this year, one of the things that they've changed is that they've added selected response items. Lauren and I both field tested, or I know I did, and those were all multiple choice for me. So they said there will be approximately 45 of those. And it's timed, and it's showing that you know your content knowledge. Component 2 is the differentiation and instruction portfolio entry. What this is going to be asking you to do is how you meet the needs of every student in your classroom. You have to submit student work, so you're going to be expected, of course, to analyze that and to justify what that work sample tells you. So what that student can do or can't do, and how you know, and what is the next teaching that should happen. The write-up for component 2 of what you would be writing to explain where your students are at. I think with both of the generalists certificate areas, we'll look at those a little closer. But those, you would be writing about 12 pages about the students, and then you submit 3 work samples from each student. And some things that you are going to want to think about, that if you start this year, that it'll be at least a 3-year process for you. You may need to retake some areas, but you get your results each year, at least by the end of December. The candidates from last year just found out on Saturday how they did, if they certified. And you can retake. So if I submitted components 1 and 2, and let's say I didn't do as well on my content assessment, I will get some feedback from National Board to say that they think maybe you're going to want to think about retaking some of that content assessment. I could maybe keep the constructed response and just retake my multiple choice, or I could keep everything except one of my constructed responses and just redo that. Let's say I did really well on my assessment center and I didn't feel good about my portfolio entry, I could redo that. And I can redo things as I'm adding more things to the process. Certification lasts 10 years, and you can renew in your 8th year, and that'll extend it another 10 years after the certificate expired. That way, if you need more time with your renewal, you never lose your license doesn't ever expire. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple things here through some links. I'm going to show you the website. The National Board has a new website for people that are just starting the process, and it's boardcertifiedteachers.org, which Lawrence just put in the chat box. So I'm going to click on here. And this is what the new website looks like. There's some tabs at the top for about certification, getting started in your state for the candidates, and signing in. Once you're a candidate, you'll have a number and a login to sign in. Okay, so to register, you just go to the Get Started link and follow the directions here at the bottom. Here's where it explains again that eligibility, and you just click on the Apply Now, and you just put your name in there and get started. It's not that painful. All right, so the biggest thing to get started after you've decided that you want to commit to that, or if you want to look at these things first, is fine. This is the link, which is also on the website, for the certificates, standards, and instructions. So I'm assuming that everyone on the call is interested in generalists, but that may not be the case. They're all here if you're interested in a different one. For early childhood generalists, it's for ages 3 to 8, and middle high childhood generalists are ages 7 to 12. And when you click on, for instance, this component, it will take you straight to the component 1 for early childhood generalists. And remember, component 1 is the assessment center. So I'm going to scroll down for a little bit to show you something. This is a rubric that shows what for the multiple choice, what % of the questions cover these different standards areas. So let me explain for a second. I'm going to back up and explain that the component 1, which is really made up of the 3 essays and the multiple choice, altogether, that makes up 40% of your total score as a nationally board certified teacher. So as a candidate. So the multiple choice is half, and then each of the half of the 40%, and then each of the constructed response items would be a third of the remaining half of the 40%. So talk about math. I'll let you guys crunch those numbers. So these percentages here show with the how much of each of those multiple choice questions cover each of those content areas. Okay, and then this is where it shows you what the topics are for the constructed response items. So exercise 1 is literacy, exercise 2 is analyzing student work in mathematics, and exercise 3 is children's play. So that's the biggest part of understanding component 1. I'm going to go back. And I've already downloaded component 2. So I'm going to stop screen share for a second so I can open that file. Give me a second. Oh, wait. Hold on. I saved it into my files, but I forgot to open it. So I've got to, now I'm ready. Hold on. I'm sharing the wrong thing. Just a second. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, I've got it now. All right, this is a big document. So when you go to component 2, you have to download a zip drive, and that's why this one was, I couldn't just click on the link. There's several documents within component 2. There's things like forms that you fill out about your student work samples. There's a form that you fill out to explain your teaching situation, and it's not part of your score, but it's important to really write that well so that people understand your teaching context. So if you are a math teacher, again, the chat box, we have a 6th grade math teacher. So a 6th grade math teacher I would say, if you are at an elementary school, then I would do the early childhood or middle childhood generalist. And if you were at a middle school, I would do the mathematics certification for, I think it's called early adolescence. It's the one that's the middle school ages. Or if you would rather, you could do the exceptional needs, since you also have the special education background, the person that's asked that question. So this is going to give you an overview of if it's a different component 2, they all will look very similar. But this explains what it looks like for early childhood generalists. So for an early childhood generalist, the big idea is it's asking you to choose 2 different students and to show examples of their work that show that you foster literacy development and that you do that based on a child's needs. So your approach to assessment, your response to the assessment, and a written commentary about that, and then your samples demonstrating the child's literacy development. So this is where, for the math people, I started asking a lot of questions because I wanted to know how someone who only teaches math could show literacy examples, because I know, for instance, those of us that were funded or are funded by the Kentucky Center for Mathematics are not allowed to teach reading groups. And because of that, one of the things that I asked them was, could someone who only teaches mathematics focus on this entry in terms of how they teach literacy through mathematics? So, and the answer was absolutely. So when I asked about the role that I had, again, pulling math groups all day, what certificate area was best for me, the answer that they gave me was this early childhood generalist, because I was doing primary. So when I certified, I was a preschool teacher, and I didn't just talk about reading instruction for these students. I talked about how students were reading and writing and talking about all subject areas. So if you're only teaching reading during reading, you're not a good reading teacher. So this is showing that we collaborate with other professionals to improve literacy. Literacy isn't just reading, and that reading and writing and talking about math are a form of literacy. So understanding where somebody's at in their reading level is important too when we're teaching things like reading a problem. So I know that I have a lot of students that are struggling in math, but we're also struggling in reading. So it was something I needed to be very aware of. I'm going to scroll down a little bit because there are some prompts hold on. Okay, so when you're writing, there's the instructional context, analyzing two children's literacy development, support of literacy development, and your reflection. The instructional context, they give you suggested page lengths for each part. It's about 1 page long, and it's just asking you to talk about your class and what's important for someone to understand and for you to know when you teach these students, and that's all of your students. Then it's going to ask you to describe the students that you've chosen and what kind of questions you had about them, what are the relevant features about them, what patterns of behaviors do you see with them. And then you have about 5 pages, and this is where you're kind of splitting it between each child to talk about supporting the literacy development. So how did you ensure fairness, equity, and access for your students? In what ways do you put literacy into your daily routines? What strategies did you use? And then 1 page to reflect on how successful it was and what would you change if you were to do it again, if anything. Okay, so that's the big piece of that. Now, I talked a little bit about how I'm going to go back to the other document. I talked a little bit about how the assessment was weighted, and I want to talk a bit about how these, let me see if this is the right one. I want to talk a little bit about how the portfolio components are weighted, and this is information that was just released, so I'm not 100% certain that I'm quoting this right, but I know that the videotaped portfolio entry, which is the one that's released next year, it's component 3 on the learning environment, that one is weighted the heaviest. So I want to say that that's about, I think it's almost 50% of the portfolio entries. And these other 2 are, I think the other 25% of the 60%. But I'm not 100% sure that that's correct on the percentages. I do know that the videotaped one is weighted the most. Everyone that is certified will tell you that it really helps you to make you a more reflective practitioner. And sometimes as we reflect, we don't always, we learn that we don't, it's like now you know what you didn't know. And one of our ambassadors through this work wrote a really great blog piece called I Didn't Know What I Didn't Know, or something along those lines. And Lauren wrote a nice reflective piece when she's certified called Mirror, Mirror, and just about looking at yourself, warts and all. And I should mention, Lauren just yesterday was published in the Washington Post for another one of her recent awesome blogs. That one about trying to avoid administratoritis. So if you have an administrator that could use some advice like that, make sure that you forward Lauren's blog on to them. Some more information about, this is the website again for the new National Board website. There's a phone number that you can access. There's a phone number that you can access to call someone at National Board. There's also a website, or I'm sorry, an email where you can email them if you want a written response. KEA has a lot of great resources to support National Board candidates. They even have an email address that's manned by about 6 different people, the nbct@kea.org. And they have several free resources on their website. We also have a website through our organization, and we have an active Twitter feed if you are a Twitter person and like to follow that. You're welcome to email me anytime with questions. If you're a veteran or spouse of a veteran, something that a lot of people don't know is that the GI Bill will pay up to $2,000 of your application costs. We also have some additional funds if you're in the 1st and 5th congressional districts through a Gates grant with KEA. And many professional organizations offer scholarships for people that are going through certification. And there may or may not be federal subsidy or state subsidy money that will be available to you after you certify. There's not a guarantee that that money will be there. Some districts will pay for part or all of candidates to certify or loan you the money until you certify. But to be honest, with the new plan and the 3-year rollout, it is much more financially feasible for people to certify because the cost is spread out. Do you all have any questions or comments before I talk a little bit about some of my thoughts with the math angle? What happens if I'm not an interventionist within these 3 years for math? Okay. Right. Okay. So I think I addressed the question about 6th grade math and special ed, and I can't remember who asked it. Did you hear that answer? Okay. A. Messer, did you still have questions about the 6th grade math and special ed? I'll give you a second to text in. Beth Ann, so do you mean, are you a math interventionist now? Okay, so you're...
Yes, sorry, this is Beth Ann. Yes, I'm an interventionist now. I just didn't know, like, you know, with intervention and the money with Title I, it's a year-to-year thing.
Right, I understand. Yeah. So what's nice about certifying as a generalist, if you're a math intervention teacher, is that you would just, if your role changed, as long as you stayed within that certificate area. So if you just chose to do early childhood generalist, your classroom situation can completely change over the 3 years, as long as you're still in that age range. So if you were a math interventionist this year, you would write about that experience and from that angle. And then let's say next year you were put in a 2nd grade classroom, you would just you have to write a new contextual information page each time you do a portfolio entry. So you would just explain your new contextual information and write it about those students, because each portfolio entry is going to be scored by different people. So they're not going to know even that your role changed. You can explain that in your contextual information if you feel it's important for someone to know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, so Amy Renee, you're going to be looping with your class, moving from 3rd to 4th. Will this be a problem for me to work on the next component next year? If you are going to keep going up, or if you're planning on staying in those upper age ranges, you could do the middle childhood generalist. I think that the age on that, Lauren, can you double check? I think it's 7 to 12, I think. So it would not be a problem. I think it goes from like 3rd to 6th. Lisa, will we be focusing on math or teaching reading through math? I teach 2nd grade math. So Lisa, if you only teach math, you would be focusing on how you teach literacy, not just reading, but how you teach literacy with the kids in your environment. So if your environment is math, you'd be focusing on how you teach literacy through math. And that was one of the ideas Alice and I had about how to support math specialists, which was that it may be hard for you to think about how you're supporting literacy through that limited math environment. And so we thought it would be nice for people that were pursuing this to have opportunities to collaborate with each other, perhaps virtually, and maybe piggybacking on we were thinking there's still a lot of things in the planning phases, but even piggybacking some opportunities at the KCM conference in March. So, but if you are a 2nd grade teacher and you teach all content, areas, then it would make more sense for you to just talk about how you teach literacy all day long. If you really limit if you're a generalist already, like if you're a regular classroom teacher and you're not departmentalized, then if you only talk about how you teach literacy through math, they're going to think that you're not looking across subject areas as you support students in literacy, and they're not going to score you well at all, I wouldn't think, because this idea that when you're teaching literacy, it should be kind of embedded in everything you do. Alice, that's a really good question. I don't have a definition from them, but I could ask for one. Okay.
Thanks, Suzanne. The reason I ask about that is I've been in a couple of meetings lately and been looking into this a little bit more. And in some places, literacy is more about just language and kind of thinking with words, and it actually includes math. But then sometimes it's a more narrow idea, which is literacy is, reading and writing. So it might help to just nail that down if they have a definition available.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a good point. When I certified, it was a really long time ago, and part of at least my definition was that it involved speaking and listening in all aspects of literacy. Okay, so I'm having a hard time keeping up with the text box. Lauren, I think, is trying to help me, but you guys are exploding with good comments and questions. Apparently, yes, iPad 46 had a question next, but I don't see it. Great, Lauren, thanks for checking. So it's a middle childhood generalist.
Oh, I get that one.
Is ages 7 to 12. Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't see that you had your hand up. Can you give us your question? Okay, so I guess I'm looking for yes, iPad 46. Do you have a question? You can unmute if you want to ask us instead of type.
Backwards,
No, you answered it. Thank you.
Daddy.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so let me look back in the text box. Lauren, let me know if I'm missing something, or if anybody wants to raise a hand or let me know if I've overlooked a question. Okay, so Amy Renee had a good question about that the content test has subjects other than math. You would have to test on all of them. You don't get to just do math, because remember, you would be certifying as a generalist. So the content, the multiple choice, I think it was like, a pretty big chunk of it is for the early childhood generalist is child development. Then there's a pretty big chunk that's kind of literacy and embedding things like technology and arts in your instruction. And then there's another chunk that's like science and social studies and play and some of those things rolled together in one big chunk. And then the three constructed response items, there's a literacy, a math, and play. So math is not very heavily weighted on the content assessment. But remember, there's that constructed response, which is weighted heavier as a part than like each of those parts within the multiple choice. So that would be something that you would need to consider. There are some people, I didn't do this because I don't think they had it when I went through, but there are some people that have been telling me that have certified recently that you can buy through private companies like study cards to help you to get ready for the content assessment. Alice, did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment on Becky Reister's suggestion. Thank you, Becky. And I know the one good thing about this cohort is that there would be so much wealth of knowledge. We have people that have spent thousands of hours studying and practicing math intervention, and I know there's lots of creativity and lots of resources that could be shared. And so Becky is, an example of she already knows of things that would really help to make that connection.
Absolutely. And, a part of my job is recruiting people and not just people, but people that I know or I would think are ready for this process. And the first group of people I thought of that were primed and ready for this that weren't certified yet were all of these math interventionists across the state that have worked with the Kentucky Center for Mathematics or people that have gone through their training. So I feel like you guys are going to rock this and you should absolutely do this. Beth Myman and Belle Rush, I'm not sure if they're on the call, but they are both also certified and have been in that role or currently in the role of math interventionists, and they're interested in supporting this work as well. There was a good question here from Melanie about suggestions or ideas of how this might look for an elementary instructional coach with math science as my focus. I'm certified in elementary ed and special ed. So I would say, Melanie, that you're probably not going to want to certify as special ed only because that's not what you're doing right now in your current role. You would want to think about if you'd rather do the middle childhood or early childhood, like where you're spending the majority of your time, but you would still certify as a generalist, I would think, because there is a literacy certificate that spans all of elementary, but since that's not your focus as an instructional coach, I think it would make more sense to do the generalist certificate and to just pick the age range that makes more sense for you. And as a coach, I am actually helping a friend of mine that's an instructional coach here in Danville to certify. And we're going to be looking in more detail and considering, like, she has to pick, obviously, students for this first portfolio entry to work with, and how she supports literacy through the groups that she does pull or when she collaborates in classrooms. So I would recommend either kind of co-teaching with a teacher for part of the day, or pulling a regular small group in order to do that as an instructional coach, because you have to have a relationship with the students and to really understand them in order to do this. So one of the things, if you're not already doing that, that's nice about National Board is that it gives you the permission to do that often with an administrator. So let's say that you're in a role where you should be collaborating, but you feel like you're seeing closed doors all the time, that people don't always want to let you into their classroom. There's a lot of really great examples of people that have certified, and we'll talk about how National Board certification opened those doors with other teachers because they were forced to collaborate and could use National Board as an excuse to get those doors open, and it really changed their relationship with those teachers and their role from then on. So maybe if you, as a coach, if you haven't already co-taught or collaborated a lot or pulled some regular groups and it's something you want to do, you could talk to your administrator about that you have to, and say, I want to pursue this and I have to do this. Will you support me with this role? Those teachers are going to see the difference it makes with their students, and they're going to demand that you do it all the time, so that you get to carve out some time to be with regular students and learn from that experience. So Amy, I think I answered the question. The content assessment, regardless, you do have to do all of the areas. Let's see. I have ELL students in my classroom. This is from R. Bell. So I focus on academic language, and we are incorporating math writing portfolios as we rotate in math stations, going to a Write About Math at least 2 times a week. I was thinking, since I was already doing this, I thought I'd be able to work toward applying this toward a degree. Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. And one of the things that's so powerful about National Board, and it's in all of the certificate areas is proving, you have to prove this in every portfolio entry, this idea of equity and access, and what you're doing for those ELL students to provide them with some different supports and some different access that they need in order to make the situation more equitable is absolutely perfect. And it sounds like you've already got a great environment. So Arbel, you're ready to roll. All right, I think I'm caught up on questions. Are there any more?
Suzanne, I had a question. This is Alice. So if somebody decides to get on board and they start into compiling their portfolio, and how much flexibility is there here, since within the framework of the early generalist is, I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't want to wait too far into the process, but let's say somebody starts into focusing on math and then realizes that maybe they want to be more, across the content areas, then would they have some flexibility there?
I think you have to determine what area that you want to certify in. I know you have to name that when the deadline is February 28th. Mm-hmm. I think there's a deadline that's a little bit after that where you can change it, but it's not much after that, because you aren't going to want to change it too much after that, because it would be like starting over. Mm-hmm. If you change it the following year or something, you're going to have to start over, because you can't take that certificate and then, because each portfolio entry would be different, you couldn't say, well, I'm just going to redo these other content areas in this one certificate. You'd have to start the process over if you completely change. So you could, though, I'm assuming that somebody who's in a math role right now would be in that math role all year. So I know that there are people who are concerned about their roles changing next year, especially with the grants being refunded in December. So they could go ahead and do that math role part of a generalist right now. And then if they switch roles next year, then it's not a problem, as long as they're still falling within that certificate area. So it's more about the age range if you're choosing generalist. So whether you choose the early childhood generalist or the middle childhood generalist. Something I should also specify in Kentucky, when you become nationally board certified, that does not change your teaching certificate. It's added to your certificate. There'll be like a NBCT added to your certificate. But for instance, my initial certification is as an interdisciplinary early childhood educator. Lots of words to say. It's like a combined certificate for special ed and early childhood. And in Kentucky, that certificate only certifies me birth through kindergarten. So in other states, I would be certified birth through 8 or 3rd grade. But in Kentucky, I think it's the only state that only recognizes that up through kindergarten. So as a classroom teacher, I'm only certified to do preschool and kindergarten. I got my national board certification in early childhood generalist, which is birth, or I think it's 3 to 8. And so I can't be a classroom teacher in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade in Kentucky, because in Kentucky my certification only goes to kindergarten. National board doesn't make me certified in Kentucky to teach as a classroom teacher in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade. So it's not going to change your certificate area. You have to really, you don't have to do your national board and what you're certified in, because mine was a little different, but it doesn't make me then eligible to teach in that other area. So I hope I'm explaining myself well. In some states it does, but in Kentucky it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Alice?
Yes, I think it does. So, and I'm sure you'll lay out, and I think our next meeting is to help also with that, laying out what would the steps be then to help people really get immersed in this enough to know what their plan would be.
Right. Well, and one of the things that people can do is after you register, we have an option to, you can have a mentor that would be in your local area. You could have a mentor that's in your certificate area. You could do where you could work with the mentor. You could also dabble into helping or working with this Kentucky Center for Mathematics work, or you could just have the Kentucky Center for Mathematics type group that we're planning to be your cohort or your support. What I had envisioned when I was, and we're still working out the plan, Alice and I are meeting next week to talk about it a little more now that we know that there's people that are interested. But when I went through, I had a mentor and she had a cohort of us that were working with her. There were 6 of us that were assigned to her, and we met regularly in person. But this was way before people had virtual meetings anyways. So we met in person, and then we also met often at the same time of several other cohort groups. So we met at the OVEC office, the co-op there, and we would sometimes have meetings where we would just read each other's work and give each other feedback. Or if it was about differentiation, we would toss around ideas about differentiation. We would talk to each other about, I don't know what to do with this kid, or with this, I'm struggling with this entry. Could somebody help me? I need to study this idea on this test. Does anybody have somewhere that I should go? I'd like to learn more about this idea. Does somebody have a teacher that I could talk to? And we learned more from each other, and she was just a really good facilitator. And that environment of having a group of us going through the process together was really rich. And I'd like to provide that opportunity for people that are focused on math, if that's something that you're interested in. We are recording the session, and Lauren and I are working on some logistics in terms of how to share these links with people afterward. So everyone who's on the Eventbrite will automatically get it. So I know some people registered on there and were not able to come. So if you have friends, when we share that link that you think would like to know more about National Board, please feel free to share that with anybody, because as you know, the information that we covered in this are really eligible for all subject areas, even though we spent some time talking about how this would look a little different for those people that are elementary math teachers. If anyone needs to hop off, we understand and value your time. I know, looking forward to some days off with my family. If you have questions that you want to ask, please feel free to chime in or put them in the text box. And Alice and I are going to be meeting next week to talk about some things that we could do to support you on this journey. So if you have things that, Scotty, great. I'm so glad to hear it. So if you have things that you would want from us and you think of them, feel free to email me or Alice. And that way we can try to incorporate that into our plan. I am expecting a bunch of my MIT buddies to do this. So that means you, Scotty, and Becky, and Helen, and no pressure.
And thanks, Suzanne, and all the MITs. I'm looking forward to learning more from you all too in this process. So it's exciting.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. I should mention that to everyone too, Scotty. Absolutely be safe, because I know a lot of you are going to be on the roads. So safe travels, and hope you all have a nice, restful Thanksgiving. Bonnie, are you the one that's friends with Karen Holbrook? Bonnie Humphreys? All right. Well, Karen was my mentor. So you can imagine why I had such a great experience. I love her. So if you're friends with her, I love you too.
Suzanne, I have a feeling this is going to be the dream team. You may not have met Bonnie yet, but she's another one that's like really up to speed with what you all do.
I can't wait.
And I think it'll be a really supportive group also for people that are, you know, new to math intervention or even, you know, that way of thinking. And maybe there'll even be a way to support people who are doing math as just part of their plan. I don't know. We'll see.
Bonnie, would you be interested in helping us as a mentor with this group? Or would you rather do people in your area over in Gallatin?
In fact, Bonnie just finished her math recovery course last year, I think.
Yeah, and I know Karen told me, and she also mentioned in the chat box, she's certified with Karen. So she's been through renewal. And Belle and I have also been through renewal, and Beth is going to be renewing. So I think we could help her through renewal.
Good.
This process.
She may have jumped off here, I guess.
Yeah. She might have. And I've kind of put her on the spot. Oh, Karen talked about Gallatin. I'm going to put you on the spot. Well, you all have a great night. Don't feel like you have to hang on. I think we're done with questions. So if you think of some later, like I always do, you know, in the shower the next day or something on the road, feel free to email me later with questions if they come up.
Suzanne, about how many other people had expressed interest but that couldn't be here for the live meeting?
I know that over 50 registered, and I know there weren't over 50 on. I don't know if Lauren kept track of numbers at all.
I think we got up to 26.
Okay. There were a lot of people that said they couldn't make it and they wanted a recording. I think that I can't remember if everybody that registered I already had on. I have another Excel document of people that are interested, and I need to cross-check that and see how many of those people were the same. But I'll send the recording out to everybody that was on my Excel and on the Eventbrite list.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the people that were interested initially, though, were classroom teachers and teaching all subjects, and really, I don't think understood what we were doing at first. I think they thought it was a different certificate.
Okay.
So, oh,